We are looking at protecting something that we've developed in Europe. We have made the wind industry, and as we saw with solar PV, we basically gave it away. We had an industry and we do not have that anymore. So we are trying to prevent that from happening.
Wind energy is advancing rapidly to meet climate targets and energy security needs. But as the industry grows, so do the challenges of its global supply chains. Uneven quality standards, production inefficiencies, and misaligned processes risk slowing progress and skyrocketing costs. That is, unless apparent competitors collaborate on a shared framework for efficiency and reliability. And that is exactly what the Danish wind industry has done. My name is Maria Lind Arlo, and you're listening to Sound of Green, a podcast from State of Green. Each episode, we invite experts and stakeholders to convey Danish perspectives on a given challenge of the global green transition. By sharing these experiences, we hope to help you do the same. In this episode, we tell the story of how collaboration, rather than contest, is shaping the future of renewable energy, and why standardization is not just a dry technicality, it's actually a competitive advantage. Around a decade ago, the Danish wind industry was facing a problem that was threatening the industry's expansion, efficiency, and competitiveness. And it concerned the relationship between two product criteria often pitted against each other: price and quality.
So as that time, as many other times, price was the issue and price was discussed, and then quality came afterwards.
This is Kim Schmidt-Petersen, Vice President of Global Quality, Health, Safety, and Environment at KK Wind Solutions, a supplier of electrical systems and automation solutions for wind turbines. Now, it's nothing new that price tends to be king in most industries. What's sometimes forgotten, however, is that sidelining quality also comes with a price: the price of fixing defects and mistakes. And as Kim explains, this was becoming an apparent problem across the wind industry.
At that point of time, companies had quite a high cost of poor quality. So the need was there to do something different, and the push internally in the different companies was there.
While the industry collectively agreed that there was a need for more focus on quality requirements, it wasn't necessarily clear what that meant in practice. As Kim recalls, companies like KK Wind Solutions, the suppliers in the wind value chain, were struggling to decipher the signals put forth by their customers, the original equipment manufacturers, or OEMs, the companies that actually produce the wind turbines.
I actually recall a funny situation where the OEMs were presenting their future requirements and intention for improving the quality towards the supply base. And after that long, good presentation and a lot of good activities and stuff like this, one of the suppliers' CEO stand up and said, "Yeah, that's fine about all this, but how much of this is actually reality? Because when we meet your purchasers, it's all about money and prices and reduction." And you know, it was like, oh, that hurts, right? And it was like, okay, so how to move on from there?
Importantly, this frustration was also felt on the OEM side of the equation.
I am Ike Anyangwo Abo. I am an American. I have about 30 years experience between the automotive and renewable energy sectors. The bulk of my renewable energy experience coming from Vestas.
Today, Ike is a senior director at the developer Res Group. But back when he was at the Danish OEM Vestas, he was approached by a colleague about how to address the tension in the industry. And as it turns out, Ike's experience in the automotive industry came in handy.
He came to me one time and said, "Hey, Ike, we're having problems with suppliers getting frustrated because, you know, we're demanding certain things from the suppliers, and then Siemens Gamesa turns around and demands yet something else, and so we're getting frustrated with this." And he said, we're what can we do to get away, find a way out of this? And I said, well, this is what happened in the automotive industry in the mid-90s.
Okay, time for a quick but important story within this story. So, in the mid-90s, the big three of the American auto industry, Ford, GM, and Chrysler, came together to tackle the very problem that the Danish wind industry was facing in the mid-2010s. How do you streamline the basic understanding of quality processes in all stages of product development in order to reduce costs? They came up with the concept of Advanced Product Quality Planning, or APQP, which is a framework that standardizes stakeholder communication and product development to ensure that quality is maintained throughout each stage. Now, flash forward to 2014. Companies in the Danish wind industry were actually already drawing upon the APQP concept. The problem was that they all had their own interpretation of it. So, the missing piece was for the big players to sit down, just like Ford, GM, and Chrysler did, to reach a common understanding of what quality meant in the wind industry. And that's exactly what Vestas, Siemens Gamesa, KK Wind Solutions, and LM Wind Power did, in spite of their apparent role as competitors, as Ike explains.
And it was really strange. I mean, we're taught to not trust each other. We're taught not to engage with we're competitors. And from that time that we spent with them initially, we developed the term competitor colleagues, where, of course we're competitors, of course, but at the same time, there are things we can learn from each other. There are things we can share with each other that are common across the board that can help the entire industry as well as our business.
So how do you create a space where competitors become colleagues? I asked that question to Kim from KK Wind Solutions, who was in those very rooms. And as he states, trust and clear boundaries were the key to having constructive discussions.
We sort of created a door-closed policy. We were not telling anything that we could not say openly, but it was more of this relationship and trust of some of the systemic issues, not specifically in the product-related issues and stuff like this, but some of the systemic issues on the process level. And from those discussions came a consolidated view, I would say, that change was needed and we needed to do something differently.
That last part is important because conversation can only do so much. The companies had to agree on new procedures for projects and quality assurance to bring about the needed change. And that's what they did.
The Vestas project model and the Siemens project model, they actually dared to sit together and align. And that alignment was the foundation for the framework and the phasing that we actually use today in the workbook. I think that's quite extraordinary.
The framework that came out of this exercise that Kim is talking about was aptly named APQP4Wind. Aside from the four leading companies, this initiative was also facilitated and supported by the Danish Industry Association for Wind and Renewables, called Green Power Denmark, as they saw the need for someone to set a new direction.
They can't talk about the product that they're going to put on the street tomorrow, but they can talk about where should the sector be in 10 years. And that's just important that you know where you're going.
This is Lea Bigum Wigman, head of Green Power Denmark's Industry and Innovation Department. And as she states, the story of APQP4Wind is very much the story of the Danish wind industry as a whole.
Starts just of some people going to a room, and suddenly it's a global business. It's I love seeing it, because I also think it's a picture of the Danish wind industry. That's what happens. Somebody has an idea, and then suddenly it's just grown. It's sort of like you can almost feel those grassroots that were in the 80s, and now they're suddenly big and professional and streamlined and global.
Since its humble beginnings in the Danish region of Midtjylland, APQP4Wind has truly gone global. In 2018, it was formalized into an independent organization spearheading the promotion of the framework, and it has been a successful effort. Today, the organization can boast 1,500 member companies across the wind value chain who have adopted the methodology into their practices, and over 7,000 people worldwide who have conducted training in executing the methodology. And to hear it from Kim and Ike, who've championed APQP4Wind since the beginning, this has all happened organically because the need was truly there, not just in Denmark, but in the global wind industry.
When we launched the first manual, people were starting to buy it, and some of the webinars that we saw people coming in from US, China, Spain, it came in all over, and it was like, okay, there is really a foundation here. And then as we sort of say continued the journey and stuff like this, it became clear that we have entered into something that was a need.
So that's how it started back in 2015, and in the succeeding decade, it's grown quite a bit, as you can see, and we're hoping to grow even more.
The success of APQP4Wind begs the question: how on earth do you convince an industry facing a price pressure that standardization and quality assurance is sexy? Well, you have to convince them that the common good is aligned with the individual good. At least that was what Kim from KK Wind Solutions tried to do whenever he was confronted with skepticism.
We were selling it to say, well, we all need to take a fair share of the improvement on the quality journey, because we see we have as an industry a too high level of cost of poor quality. And it was not a blame game, but it was a tool to create more transparency in where we saw the different challenges. And then when they were confronting me, I was always saying, well, think of it this way. Don't do it for the sake of your customers. Do it for your own sake. If you lean forward, this will provide a framework and a transparency within the organization that you know that you're in control.
Another benefit of having common methodology around quality in the sector is that the skills needed to perform well become transparent, which is a competitive advantage, as Lea from Green Power Denmark explains.
And what comes out of it is a very flexible sector. If I work for company A, I can just go and work for company B. And then I can go and work for company C. And it's the same standards, it's the same procedures. And that's really helpful, because you always know that if people come with these certifications or whatever, then you know that they know what's going on. They can do it how we want to do it in our company.
While this is all good and well, the most straightforward selling point for adopting APQP4Wind continues to be the one that sparked its conception.
It lowers cost. It's as simple as that. It lowers cost. So I can I wax poetic here and sound like, oh, collaboration and trust and but really it lowers costs, and that's why it's important.
This simple message has been especially important when selling the concept abroad and to companies in other parts of the value chain that might not have as mature a relationship to quality assurance as suppliers and OEMs. And Ike from Res Group knows this better than most. He was appointed as a country ambassador of APQP4Wind in the US, and when he had to sell the framework to Res Group, a developer of renewable energy projects, he went back to basics.
But everything has to be a business case. Quality in and of itself is not the selling point. We want to make money, and this is how we can do it. This is a model that APQP4Wind actually authored. Let's follow it. And now, as a result, in Res, that's one thing we're driving. We're looking at measuring the cost impact of our quality, and that is a direct inspiration from APQP4Wind.
Another important argument that Ike invoked for Res Group to become an APQP4Wind member company was the competitive advantage of having influence in a growing global movement that's working to reshape the industry landscape.
I said, APQP4Wind, along with the Global Wind Organization on the safety side, they set up the procedures, they set up the framework, they actually reach out to governments and do the lobbying. We probably want to be a part of that. We probably don't want to be hit on the backside with requirements that we didn't have any hand in making. And so that was a big selling point, to be honest with you, for Res joining, looking back on it.
The possibility for influence is something that the APQP4Wind organization prides itself on. And as Kim from KK Wind Solutions explains, it's actually paramount that companies provide input to the organization in order for the framework to be as effective and indicative of the industry's reality as possible.
We hope that we, through the company membership, can provide an opportunity for engaging in dialogues and communities and expansion of the scope and a level of perfection of the manuals, instructions, and the tools associated with it, that we can improve that. It's also an invitation to some of these suppliers that don't feel that the template is suited for them right now. Lean forward, join the community, and step into it. We have several improvement tracks where you can join in, and then let's mature together.
The mission of making the wind industry more standardized and cost-effective is still as important today as it was 10 years ago. Actually, even more so, because in the decade since APQP4Wind was created, the political ambitions for the build-out of wind have skyrocketed. The EU has set a target to install 425 gigawatts of wind by 2030, which means that it needs to almost double its current wind energy capacity in just a few years. And as Lea from Green Power Denmark states, there's still a way to go from goals to successful deployment.
We are talking about wind is going to be the backbone of the electricity system. It's going to be the backbone of energy production. It's amazing numbers. But how do you do that? How do you actually do that and use the energy in a way that, you don't have a brag-out or a brown-out all the time? I think that's...
As she explains, the certainty that standardization like APQP4Wind provides plays an important role in scaling up the technology.
It streamlines. Every time you're going to do something, you can, in a large scale, you have to have procedures, you have to have streamlining. You have to know that, okay, we are going to have to do this to achieve this over here. And you need to know that the process in between just is going to work. And if you have a recipe for that always works, then you can do it.
This seems like a fitting moment to mention that this episode is being recorded in the spring of 2025, and certainty is in short supply. The geopolitical volatility of recent years has fundamentally reshaped the conversation about competitiveness. And as Lea argues, the stakes of the current moment in the wind industry are incredibly high.
I have to mention the geopolitical situation because that's, I think we could call it interesting if we were kind, perhaps. The conversation we are having right now, we couldn't have had 7 or 8 years ago. It would have been unthinkable, or perhaps even just 5 years ago, we would never have had these conversations about how we are going to look, how can we secure our own production and in the way we're doing right now. We are looking at protecting something that we've developed in Europe. We have made the wind industry, and as we saw with solar PV, we basically gave it away. We had an industry and we do not have that anymore. So we are trying to prevent that from happening.
The geopolitical instability is also felt in the APQP4Wind community. However, when I asked Kim from KK Wind Solutions about the continued importance of APQP4Wind in this very moment, he didn't flinch one bit.
In those turbulent times, combined with a cost pressure, it's important that we never compromise on quality, and that we remember that, and that we, if we should have forgot, remember that the price of the retrofit campaigns and fixing the problem in the field is extremely expensive.
Actually, the principles of APQP4Wind might just be what's needed, not just on industry level, but on a political level to secure the competitiveness of the transition to renewables, as Lea posits.
We have a moment here that we can't let red tape and slow decision making and permitting from hell. We can't let that be, the stopper for this. That would be absolutely insanely stupid. So we have to sort of look at how can we streamline this a bit more, perhaps have a bit of standardization happening here as well, and say, how can we just do how can we both make sure that the renewables are deployed, and how can we make sure that we protect our European wind industry?
Ultimately, the burning platform for supporting and protecting the wind industry is the vision of an energy system with security of supply. And as Lea reflects, this is not a new notion.
Before globalization, it was one of the key points, wasn't it, that you have to have a security of energy supply And we're back to that. We have to be certain that we can make our own energy, and we have to be certain that we can make the facilities that make this energy, or the turbines, or the technology. We have to make sure we have that, and we can control it ourselves.
This kind of thinking is exactly what brought about the green transition and the emergence of the wind industry in Denmark in the aftermath of the 70s oil embargo. And in that very precarious moment, the Danish decision to bet on long-term planning for energy security in the face of crisis can be a source of encouragement, as Ike from Rest Group states.
You guys got together and said, we're never going to be that vulnerable again. We're going to have a 10, 20, 30-year plan. And you guys set about doing it. And I saw the benefit of it. When I was in Denmark, I saw the fact that, wind energy went from like 10% to 20% to now, typically on really windy days, Denmark can get 100% of its energy from wind, and even export energy across the bridge to Sweden and down to Germany. And I think that is what happens when you think long term and you learn from your mistakes. And that, to be honest with you, inspires me going forward.
In many ways, APQP4Wind is a microcosmos of being willing to take the long view, to prioritize planning, and to learn from your mistakes. I guess the big question that remains is, has it worked? According to Kim from Wind Solutions, the signs are pointing in the right direction.
So I have a strong belief that we're doing the right thing. We can see that we are making risk reductions and we are closing learning loops. So I have a strong belief that it is working, and I have a strong belief that we can prove that, and we can see the reduction of the cost per quality across the industry by utilizing this here.
This is great news and incredibly significant, not just for the future of the wind industry, but for the entire energy system, as Lea from Green Power Denmark explains.
We're not just looking at the wind turbine as a turbine. It's a turbine that has to exist in the energy system, and it has to exist with PTX, and it has to exist with a grid that expects energy or electricity when it's been told that there will be this electricity, and so it's a turbine that has to exist as a mature technology, and I think that's really what's been happening.
Importantly, the benefits of a wind industry marked by high quality, maturity, and competitiveness reach beyond the industry itself. It's the energy consumers that will ultimately reap the rewards, as Ike from Rest Group observes.
This benefit to the entire value chain. This includes the owners. This includes the developers. This includes, obviously, the manufacturers. And most importantly, this includes the communities that they operate in. And so, when we look at a long-term approach, the selling point to policymakers is their constituents, how it improves the lives for their constituents going forward in a sustainable, energy-independent, long-term fashion.
At a time when conversations about the green transition can feel discouraging, stories like the Danish wind industry and APQP4Wind are good reminders that hard times sometimes gives the clarity and the imperative needed to push forward collectively. I must admit that I can feel a bit discouraged and uncertain about the state of the green transition right now, and I'm sure some of our listeners might feel the same way. Do you perhaps have any parting words of encouragement that we can give them?
The one encouragement I give them is that the train can't stop. Renewable energy cannot be stopped, no matter what the administration is, because quite frankly, the business case is there. And with the drop in levelized cost of energy from renewable energy, especially wind, it's only a matter of time. So no matter what executive orders come out of Washington, D.C., or lobbying gets done in Washington, D.C., or messages sent to Europe and the rest of the world, the train won't stop.
What an opportunity that we have a production industry in Europe that supplies this adventure that we're going on, this green adventure. That's rather great.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sound of Green. A special thanks to Lea Bigum Wigman from Green Power Denmark, Kim Schmidt-Petersen from Wind Solutions, and Ike Anyanwu Ebo from Rest Group. Until next time, you can visit our website, stateofgreen.com, where you can find previous episodes as well as more information on Denmark's green transition.